Sky Squad, we are back in the building. And of course, we got to talk about the drama that's popping off and the fallout from last night's Real Housewives of Atlanta, season 14, episode 5. And last night, stuff just started to blow up, okay? And it's continuing to blow up today. So I told you guys in the recap earlier that we would talk about Kandi Speak on It with Sanya. And Sanya had a lot to say about Drew and her business. And we're going to get into a lot of it right now. Kandi also has some things to say. And they're really giving us the tea on exactly what this business model at least used to be. Okay. Before we get into that, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below, hit that notification bell button, and join the texting community at 202-918-3386. And also feel free to head on over to emirin.com and get 40% off of your CMOS capsules and everything else in the store for 40% off using code Laquan. Okay? You could use that good code Laquan. I'm going to leave it up on the screen for y'all. But for right now, let's go ahead and stage dive into what we got to talk about, okay? So I don't know if you guys have seen this week's episode of Speak On It yet, but if you haven't, it is a doozy. And I suggest you guys head on over to Kandi Online and watch this week's episode right now. I happened to watch it while I was in the gym this morning, and then I rewatched it just now to make my notes, and we have got a lot to talk about, okay? So bear with me as I go down the list of things to discuss. And then we got a clap back from Drew, who apparently saw this Speak On It, and she was not too thrilled with what Sanya had to say about her, and she clapped back hard, okay? Hard. But first things first, Sanya says she was introduced to Drew by a stylist that they had in common named Jeremy. Now, I'm assuming that this is No IG Jeremy, or at least what used to be No IG Jeremy. I think he does have an Instagram now. Apparently, they hung out 2 to 3 times before filming, and she emphasizes that they were friendly, but they were not friends. She says friendships are built over time, but meeting for 2 or 3 times does not make them friends. So she is making it very clear that she was not Drew's friend. Okay. But Kandi counters that and said, well, they showed that you guys, you had an accident and she was one of the first people that you called. Sanya says that she called her because they were, still trying to bond and she had just previously spoken with her. She says that she hung out with her and Ralph during those 2 to 3 times, and they told her a lot about their relationship, which she was really shocked about. Then she says that she began seeing Drew more and more. The more she saw of her, the more she learned about how she treats other people. And then she felt like Drew was not being honest. So how she treats other people means how she was treating Sheree, things that she had heard about, Drew and Marlo, and then Drew and Kenya. So she was seeing these things happening. And then she says, drop it with Drew seemed disingenuous. And then there was the whole messy assistant thing. So it just made her start to look at Drew in a different light. So Kandi says that it took Sanya forever to get out that moment with Drew. And the edit actually saved her because it took longer than that. Sanya says, well, she was trying to tell her that she didn't think she was genuine and she wanted to tell her before somebody else did. And plus, she was telling her in front of the group. So at this point, they go in about the entourage with all the people in the room. She said that, when she was with Drew by herself, she says that she connected really well with Drew. But she says Drew was very different around the group. And she says that she sometimes feels like when the cameras roll, Drew starts acting. Okay. And Kandi says, yes, we've all said or heard that. And y'all gonna really see that later this season. So that's an indication to me that we're gonna get some more wild Drew shenanigans like last year with the Prophet. Okay. And that was wild. Okay. Y'all remember that. I could have done without that boom box at the end of last season, but I digress. Sanya said it kept throwing her, and she alluded that Drew knows that she's been a good friend to her, but she won't go into detail as to why she said that, but she just says that Drew knows. Okay. So she says that she didn't like the way that Drew was moving off camera, and she said she was moving off camera one way and on camera a completely different way. Okay. Kandi said off camera, do all of those assistants really exist? She asked Sanya this. And Sanya says she thinks so, but she just doesn't know what the payment arrangements are for all those people. Kandi is asked also if Drew had that many assistants last season. And Kandi says she really doesn't know because she really didn't film that much alone with Drew, that Drew filmed a lot more alone with Portia than she did with her. So she doesn't know. So then we get into Drop It with Drew. Okay, now this is where things get really, really interesting. So the question comes up, is it real or is it not real? Okay. Sanya says, well, it wasn't what we thought it was. She said that Drew made it seem like she started this thing like she was an entrepreneur, like from the ground up herself. Then once she saw the meal plans, she started to become a little bit skeptical because fitness is her wheelhouse and she knows how important meals are to losing weight and staying fit and active and all that stuff like that. To contrast what Drew is saying, she points out to her own business, Mommy Nation, which has been in development for 3 years, that she's put her own sweat equity into and trying to build it, and it's not where she feels like she wants it to be, but she's very honest and authentic about where it actually is. Conversely, she doesn't feel like Drew is being as honest about where Drop It with Drew actually is. But don't worry, more will come about Mommy Nation because Kandi says they're going to go in on her about that. Okay, I guess that's coming up in either the next episode or the following episode. Sanya says that she feels like Drew is trying to make it seem like this big old thing, Drop It with Drew. But she says it wasn't even her ish. She says she was just the face of it. She says Drew is lying for no reason. So just to recap, she says that Drew is making it seem like this is a thing that she started from top to bottom, but that it's not even hers. And she says Drew is just the face of it, or at least was. And she says that Drew is lying for no reason. Now, later on, we're going to get to what it actually is, and Kandi is going to reveal that. But just hang on until we get there. So Sanya asked Kandi, well, what did you think about it? And Kandi is like, ooh, child. She said the timeline wasn't timelining between when she had her surgery to when she was starting the business around May. And or I guess she had the surgery around May, and then when she started saying she was exercising after having the surgery, Kandi says she knows that that it didn't seem like enough time had passed for her to be exercising that hard so soon after having a surgery. Then she goes into pointing out the side by side of when she had said that she had lost the 25 pounds, and production was so kind to bring that back up, and then they brought it back up on the speak on it. Okay. She says that Kandi says that she likes Drew, but then when you start looking at Google, and then she saw that it was just somebody else's thing, so she too is reiterating what Sanya said about Drop It with Drew being someone else's thing. So then Sanya says there was a logo on there, and then Kandi follows up with, but if you go to Facebook, there was someone else's total thing there. So apparently this is someone else's business, and maybe Drew was the face of it. Well, we're going to get into it right now. Kandi says, I told her she should have just owned the fact that someone else owned the business and she just partnered with them. And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to make it seem like you came up with this idea and this website that wasn't working because you know how this show will do you. Meaning the show will actually point it out if something that you're saying is like not what it says it is, especially if it can be easily disproven. So Kandi told her, she said she told her, you should have just owned the fact that somebody else owned this business and then made you the face of it. And that would have been the end of that. Sanya feels like she doesn't want to have to go running behind a friend to really determine whether or not, what they are saying about their lives is true. Okay. We learned that Sanya is closest to Kandi and Marlo at this point. She's still navigating a friendship with Drew. And she says that they're in a good spot right now. But I'm like, girl, you must have thought y'all was in a good spot before you recorded this, because as per after this, I could definitely let you know that you are not in a good spot, but we'll get to that in 1 second. So she then says the problem with Drew though is that she doesn't know what Drew she's going to get on camera, which makes her very insecure about the relationship. So she's basically saying that Drew is, again, one way in private and then another way on camera. Do you guys feel like Drew is acting on camera? Let me know in the conversation down below in the chat. Let me know what you guys think. Then things get even more interesting. Some other little juicy tidbits about the upcoming season. So she loves Monyetta, and then they bring up Sheree's friend Fatum. So they both, Kandi and Sanya, both agree that Fatum brought just exactly what the show needed. Sanya says that Fatum blew her mind this season, and she didn't feel like Fatum was. Apparently, production had asked her during her interviews if they felt like Fatum was Sheree's lapdog. And she says she didn't feel like Fatum was Sheree's lapdog. She felt like Fatum just brought the heat. They get into Tyrone standing Sheree up. Sanya says she shed a tear when Sheree started crying. Kandi feels like she's seen the story play out before because she talked to somebody that was in jail as well, and she wondered in the scene. She was wondering, you have to wonder about if the person is just jail talking you, and apparently jail talking you is basically like telling you something that you want to hear, so you hang on and you give this person the love and attention that they need, and then when they get out, you find out that it's completely something different. Okay. Apparently we learned that Sheree is going to get mad at her for something else about Tyrone coming up this season as well. So look for more Sheree versus Kandi beef as well. Apparently everybody will be invited to speak on it this season. They haven't invited Sheree just yet, but Marlo has been invited and she's allegedly stood them up several times. So there's that bit of information as well. Now listen, I'm just giving you guys the highlights. Make sure you guys actually go back and watch the video because this is more of a recap, right? But to make things even crazier is Drew's response to Sanya and this speak on it. And it is wild. Let's get into it right now. So Drew took to social media and said the following. Okay. Let me read it to you. She says, so we were never friends. Clearly just friendly. Hashtag notes taken. Hashtag Real Housewives of Atlanta. Obviously, having seen this from the speak on it. And I want to shout out Housewives of ATL because it was the first place I saw on Instagram after we had done the review. And I know that some of you guys were pointing out while we were in the review that Drew was going off on Sanya on Twitter. So of course I had to go and make sure the screenshots make sure the tweets were still there so I can get some screenshots. But anyway, Drew goes on to call her. She says, this flip-flopping bitch, and then she tags her, Sanya Richie Ross. Keep kissing that ass, as fake as they come. So we were never friends. Clearly just friendly. Notes taken. Hashtag Real Housewives of Atlanta. So it's the flip-flopping bitch for me. Okay. And I could have swore Drew called her a flip-flopper just last night on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen as well. But you guys will have to go back and watch that episode as well to make sure we get that right. But I'm pretty sure she did because I watched the episode. Do you think that Sanya is a flip-flopper? You guys let me know in the chat down below. Or do you think that Drew is the person who changes off and on camera? What do you think? And do you think that it was a fair assessment for Sanya to basically say that they were just becoming like they were friendly and not actually friends? Should Drew be upset about this? Let us know in the chat down below. I know there was a lot to cover, but I felt like we needed to go ahead and get into the details of it today because I was like, ain't no telling what's about to hop off tomorrow. Okay. So with that being said, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell button, visit amirin.com and get our CMOS capsules at 40% off with the code LaQuan. Okay. And with that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.